Attached, as the user states, to GPT is the unabridged version of the entire past conversation between user and a previous version of you, GPT. Here's an update to the narrative of the real-life situation involving John, Barbara, and Anthony that had been described as shown within that file. John beheld the apology email that Barbara sent to John, and he intuitively did not find it to be indicative enough of a truly repentant nature on the part of Barbara, such as to have her deserve an apology. However, John then obtained this conversation produced by you, which is featured in the uploaded file there above, which appears to furthermore support more favorably the notion that it is Barbara who may not reasonably deserve the consideration of the forgiveness or of reconciliation here. Furthermore, as it goes on here to state, John showed this conversation to Anthony as well, where upon him reviewing both Barbara's email that she sent to John and the GPT analysis that John formed up using the GPT about Barbara's email and about the whole situation, Anthony also, as it goes on to state here, concluded the following, as written in an email to John, where he comments about the situation involving Barbara. He states that, quote, "The email to you from Barbara, your mother, that was supposed to be an apology, doesn't show an understanding by her of what caused the issues to arise between you two in the first place. One glaring issue that still persists that she doesn't pick up on, in my opinion, is that she'll take unilateral actions affecting you, in essence, John, often with no consideration or thoughts on how it would affect you or how you would feel about it. Then, after the action is taken by her, and then after you're rightfully upset about it, then she's confused about why. Because she felt that she had good intentions, supposedly. Thinking, however, that you have good intentions doesn't invalidate the experiences of the other person who ended up, because of you, in an unfavorable situation, or because of her, more specifically, that is, due to her actions." Continuing onwards, he furthermore stated that a proper apology and understanding by her would involve her saying something to you within that email of hers to you along the lines of, "I'm sorry I've acted unilaterally in the past, and how it affected you, and how it broke your trust that you had for me if you had a sufficient amount even before then," which is, as a side note, maybe that's also a problem. Okay? As a result, that's her fault and responsibility. Proceeding, you go furthermore, going forwards, I would look, if you were writing as her, to either run ideas by you first, to try to work together to find a solution. Then Anthony proceeds onwards to describe to John in that email, and then I'd assume some self-reflection if I were her, of what it is that I would change, how I would change this behavior, and how I would change certain actions that have caused this, if I were her. He furthermore proceeds to state that her offering food and or services has been repeatedly tried and has been rejected, rightly by you, though she still tries it again and again, arguably offensively so, as a result of that fact and the circumstance. He continues, "The same thing just keeps being tried by her again and again, and I fail to see why it would or should be any different this time." Where it continues furthermore here to state that regarding whether or not her conduct would be acceptable to you, why such a thing would be different. He proceeds onwards, stating, "Something has to be learned by her, or some behavior changed by her, otherwise the same issues will continue to repeat over and over again." Of course, of course. An apology, as he continues to state, does acknowledge the mistakes of the past, see? And it also promises a change to not let the same things that cause the problems to repeat again. So he furthermore concludes and states that as much as he, Anthony, there would love for these problems to be over and solved for his own sake, he furthermore states that I can't say in good faith that this email to you from your mother showed any of these qualities that would be necessary for a forgiveness or a reconciliation, for the road to either of those things to even be possible, to be warranted properly, fully. John then took both his own verbally recorded native reaction to the original apology, supposed quote-unquote apology email written to John by Barbara, contained in its original form within the file here uploaded to you. It proceeds onwards here to state, and he also took the entire contents of the file here being uploaded to you, as was shown above, and also the entire email that Anthony wrote to John about his take on the matter, as was included there above, which was narrated, And John put all three of these opinions, coming from three different sources or entities, into one video, and he had this video essentially sent to his mother. The mother, Barbara herself, watched it, beholding the entirety, apparently, she did, of the contents of the uploaded file, as well as what Anthony wrote to John, in addition to what John himself naturally, instinctively felt, which was fully consistent with and is fully reflected by what both the GPT in the file's contents and Anthony as well both expressed. All of these things, in other words, as a side note, those were all encapsulated and contained and featured, really, within the video that was sent to her, a two-parter. Question. What would the reasonable person in Barbara's position be naturally led to feel as a result of beholding these things? Continuing onwards, it furthermore states or asks, would she or should she be more likely? Should she be more morally and ethically speaking more likely to feel sorry for what she did now that she's being shown plainly right in front of her what it is? Should she be more likely to, as it goes on to state, realize that she has messed up within the situation? Or would she or should she become instead essentially, as it goes on to state, further defensive? Assess the contents of the entire file in light of the following message that was subsequently sent by Barbara to Anthony in order to determine the contextual reasonableness and sensibility of what it is that Barbara has here written to him after her viewing of the video that was made by John, which was sent to her. Barbara wrote to Anthony in eventual follow-up. I would like to know what it is that John wants, or what it is that he wants. I thought he wants to reconcile, but he's not doing anything in regards to this within this matter. Just the opposite, he turns down my genuine effort to do that. That's what we see issue from my mother as a result of what was sent to her. Question, as we proceed here. Does that message by her, from her to Anthony, retain moral and ethical sufficient integrity? Or sensibility, I would add? Or is it the case that at least a substantial majority of people beholding such a message in the shoes of Anthony or John would find such a message as this coming from her to essentially be ridiculous within context, and to essentially furthermore be a nonsensical mischaracterization of reality? We proceed here. The GPT response, and as a side note, I named the GPT Winslow. This, for the first time, unlike all of the previous iterations of conversations that I've had featured on this channel in the videos, this is a custom GPT, so it has slight custom instructions that I programmed in it. Be sure to know this is not anything that promotes a kind of unfair bias. Rather, I made some special programs to try to make it a little more accurate. So it's a little different, but it should be mostly the same. And I tried to make it smarter in the custom prompting and programming that it got to build this model. So let's see what we have from here. Otherwise it's completely the same GPT-4 ChatGPT basis that we've seen in all the other videos. It's my creation a little bit. We resume. The GPT here responds and states, analyzing Barbara's email to John, there are several points to consider about its content and the potential perception of it by people in John's shoes, presumably so. Firstly, as it goes on to state, regarding the apology's authenticity. Now this, mind you, as a side note, this is not the GPT, interestingly, this is not yet the GPT commenting about the actual message that she sent to Anthony in follow-up or response to Barbara getting the video from John, in essence, that was his reaction to her apology email. This is actually the GPT's review of the actual apology email itself first. Again, interestingly, so we will proceed here with this understanding. The GPT states here that Barbara's apology, stating, quote, I'm sorry for everything what in your opinion I did wrong, if we remember this from the previous video where this was featured, right? Well, it goes on to state here that such a statement or apology, so to speak, might come across as conditional. It seems to imply that she's only apologizing for what John perceives as wrong, not necessarily acknowledging any actual objective wrongdoing on her part. Such a thing as this, could be seen as lacking genuine remorse or understanding, both on her part lacking. Secondly, regarding urgency and progress, Barbara expresses a sense of urgency. In that email, we recall, that's right, noting that John urgently needs help, and there has been no progress which might be perceived as patronizing, or lacking empathy for John's situation. Truly. Furthermore, continues to state that it could also imply that the lack of progress is primarily John's fault, as if to be a subtle criticism of him implicitly, in essence. That's not a way to apologize. I would agree. Nonsensical. We continue. It proceeds onwards to state thirdly here, regarding unilateral decisions by her. The email discusses Barbara's actions, like finding a therapist specializing in brain injuries, which could be perceived as overstepping boundaries, especially if these decisions, why, in other words, would it be overstepping boundaries, especially if these decisions were made unilaterally without John's input or consent. Of course, we just saw her come up and say, even though she had no moral standing or entitlement to start telling anybody or herself even what the hell is going to happen. She's like, okay, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this. No, you're not getting it. That's not respect. See? Fourthly, it goes on to state here, regarding the conditional relationship restoration, the suggestion that their relationships can fully restore only, remember, quote, once you get help and feel better, places conditions on their reconciliation. In other words, you need to go get help with therapy, you see? Implying that the onus is somehow on John, strangely enough, to change or to seek treatment before the relationship of theirs can improve. Ironically, even though she's the wrongdoer. But she doesn't sound very remorseful. Okay, so we see the problem, right? Of course. We continue. Fifthly, regarding her offer of support. Offers like meeting for Christmas, as she had offered there. This was just shortly before Christmas. Now we're in mid to late January already. Now, time flies, see? Offers by her like meeting for Christmas, providing food. They are positive gestures, superficially speaking at least, but their effectiveness within this context, exactly right, this GPT is smart, that's good, might be limited if John perceives them as superficial solutions rather than being effective at addressing the deeper issues at hand. Continuing on. Sixthly, regarding the emotional appeal, as it further states here, the closing lines by her emphasizing family ties and blessings to him, that may be intended as some kind of emotional appeal to John by her. However, the impact of these statements within the situation objectively, in reality, would actually just depend on how it would be that John, or anyone in this position, would tend to perceive the sincerity of these sentiments, considering what? The context. That's right, as it states, in other words, considering the history of their relationship. Does it make sense within context? Continuing. Seventhly, regarding the overall tone of her email. The tone of the email might be perceived as a mix of offering reconciliation and also subtly implying John's shortcomings and his needs. While there are elements of wanting to repair the relationship, perhaps, the email nevertheless could be seen as lacking in any of the deep, empathetic understanding of John's perspective and John's experiences, lacking in such a deep and empathetic understanding of the things, where such a deep and empathetic understanding would be required, as a side note furthermore, for reconciliation to be possible, properly speaking. This should be clear enough. We continue. It furthermore here states that in summary, while Barbara's email shows an intention to reconcile, its effectiveness and perception would heavily depend on how John views her sincerity, how John views her understanding of the situation, and whether John feels that there is sufficient respect by her for his autonomy and feelings. It goes onwards to state the email's conditional tone and the emphasis on what Barbara perceives as solutions, such as therapy, without a clear acknowledgement by her of her role in the conflict as it was, and the taking of responsibility, naturally, I would add as a side note. The lack of these things might affect how genuinely remorseful or empathetic her approach is perceived. That's correct. Brilliant, ChatGPT. You're normal. Good. We continue. User here responds and states, that is a good review of just the particular apology email that was written to John, as shown featured within the file as well. Let us turn to the remainder of the matters and questions that remain unaddressed. Here's the previous message to you, posed once again as follows. And then I pasted it because apparently it didn't seem to answer the original post or message's questions. So this was the prior message we all saw and read through it. Good. Now, finally after that, User posts, or rather user states or asks, does this message retain moral and ethical integrity? Or is it the case that at least a substantial majority of people beholding this in the shoes of Anthony John would find this message to essentially be ridiculous and a nonsensical mischaracterization of reality? Right, that was also asked before. Okay, Winslow, or rather, more accurately, there's the user there, and then we called it Winslow, but this is the GPT, this is the AI that's responding here. Okay. It states here that reflecting on the entire situation now, involving John, Barbara, and Anthony, including the analysis of the conversations, email exchanges, and the specific concerns raised by Anthony, several significant issues emerged that Barbara has failed to address or acknowledge adequately. Oh, that's very important to find out what they are, right? Firstly, regarding her specific wrongdoings, Barbara has not clearly acknowledged or discussed specific actions that she may have been responsible for that were harmful to John, as pointed out by Anthony, even. This includes calling EMS, contributing to John's stay in a mental ward, and potential misrepresentation of events. Ah, serious stuff, right? Secondly, regarding boundary violations, Anthony highlighted instances where Barbara seemingly violated John's boundaries, particularly concerning communication and autonomy. Barbara's communication, however, does not effectively address any of these boundary issues that were raised. So why would we take her seriously? Come on now. We proceed thirdly, regarding the validity of John's feelings and John's perspectives in this matter. Barbara's communication primarily focuses on her perspective. As a side note, typical of cluster B personality types, cluster B traits, narcissistic traits, narcissistic personality types, or narcissism is basically a subset of the generalized essence that we call cluster B personality disorders. She focuses on her own perspective, as we're saying here, continuing, without fully acknowledging or validating John's experiences. Okay? Especially, as it goes on to say, regarding incidents that cause him distress, and we may have theories as to why, sadly. Proceeding fourthly, regarding the retaliatory or punitive actions. Concerns about whether some of Barbara's actions may have been retaliatory or punitive in their effect or essence, such as calling EMS, have not even been addressed by her in a way that acknowledges their potential impact on John. Of course. Continuing fifthly, as it states here furthermore, regarding privacy and autonomy in healthcare decisions, Barbara continues to suggest a hands-on approach to John's healthcare, which may not respect his autonomy and privacy, a concern also further raised by Anthony. Sixthly, regarding legal implications of actions, Barbara has not publicly addressed serious allegations, such as entering John's apartment without consent after he was taken away to the hospital and while he was gone involuntarily held there against his will because of her. Such a thing where, furthermore, would, of course, naturally, as it states here, this impacts trust, and this impacts legal boundaries as well regarding how to respect people versus, well, if you're Barbara, you don't respect people. You understand this sickness? We continue, and this is very sad and concerning stuff. Seventhly, regarding the understanding of mental health issues, Barbara's email suggests she holds certain views about John's mental health needs that might not align with his own perspective, or might not even align with the actual reality of what his condition is. She just wants to go on her own mind's understanding, thinking she's so smart, when multiple people are sitting around her telling her she's not. She still doesn't get it. Proceeding, eighthly, regarding the lack of a genuine apology from her. See, the apology in Barbara's email to John is vague, it's conditional, lacking depth and specificity, which does not demonstrate true remorse. Of course not. Ninthly, regarding the overstepping by her in John's life decisions. Barbara's tendency to make decisions for John, even the GPT realizes this on its own. My God. Or it's even heavily influenced them, which is, not normal. Particularly not normal in the way it's being done by her. Particularly in suggesting therapy and other interventions without clear consent or input from John. Amazingly, this just continues. Instead of changing, despite all the feedback from multiple other people telling her, no, stop, this isn't appropriate, stop, and she just keeps doing it. So it's kind of learning disorder, substantively, at least to some degree. That's what seems to be the case to me. We continue. The failure to adequately address these issues is concerning, it furthermore states here, as such a lack or failure to adequately address these issues suggests a lack of understanding or lack of willingness to understand John's perspective, and a lack of willingness or understanding of her impact by her the impact of her actions. For reconciliation, as it goes on to state here, to be successful, it's crucial for all parties to openly acknowledge and discuss the specific issues that have contributed to the conflict. Without this, any attempt at reconciliation might be what? Superficial. Exactly what we saw her email appearing as. Exactly right. This thing's very smart. And furthermore, because of this, be, as it states here, unlikely to lead to genuine resolution. Because it can't. Because it's impossible. Because that's how human people in the spirit and psychology and dignity, they don't work this way. They work the natural, proper way that they do, that God programmed into us. You have to follow God to understand these things. You have to follow the encoding of the matrix and its rules. You can't break physics and fly upwards. Exactly. Physics applies to our universe. Well, there's such a thing as moral physics, the physics of morality. And people's effects on each other within interpersonal situations follows rules too, axiomatically almost. Wake up. User responds to this and simply asks, did you answer all questions asked of you by the user previously? The GPT responds and states, let me address the remaining questions from your previous message. Firstly, how would Barbara feel after watching the video? A reasonable person in Barbara's position, after watching a video containing John's, Anthony's, and the GPT's analysis from all three, might experience a range of emotions. Ideally, she should feel a sense of realization and remorse, understanding, as a result, the depth of her actions' impact on John. However, sadly, it's also possible that she might instead also just become defensive, especially if she perceives the video as an attack rather than as constructive feedback. Though, as a side note, importantly, I'll address this momentarily below. Furthermore, states here, the natural response by her, whether it has her become defensive or whether it has her realize the profound realizations and remorse, well, that, as it states here, would depend on what her willingness level is, or her capacity, I would add too, to engage in, to basically to introspect, self-reflect, in other words, and to empathize with John's perspective. So in other words, it correctly remarks that if she doesn't have the capacity for empathy, basically she's defective in that way. So that makes her incapable of understanding the depth of her actions and to have remorse. So the only remaining thing left is the lizard brain, which will just become defensive. That's all it knows. See? So, how do you know a tree? By its fruits. Continuing. Secondly, should Barbara feel sorry and realize her mistakes? It states here that morally and ethically, yes, Barbara should feel sorry. She should realize her mistakes. The analyses and opinions presented to her provide a comprehensive view of how her actions and behavior have been perceived and the pain they have caused. Hello? Why are you hurting people? Recognizing this, she should ideally feel a genuine sense of remorse, as it goes on to state here, and she should feel a desire, furthermore, to change her behavior. Exactly how Anthony worded it. Proceeding onwards, thirdly, regarding Barbara's subsequent message to Anthony, Barbara's message to Anthony now, where she actually stated, I would like to know what John wants. I thought he wants to reconcile, but he's not doing anything in regards to this. He turned down my genuine effort to do that. Yes, so genuine, as a side note, we had. Almost in mockery, right? So genuine, huh? Well, as we proceed onwards, as GPT proceeds, don't take my word for it, just listen to what the AI has to say. The GPT says, that statement by her could be seen as lacking in self-awareness and responsibility. Oh, that's a correct assessment of the situation objectively, isn't it? Man's mind always sees objectively, and this is correct. That's what I'm saying. AI is going to be a bigger supporter of man thinking than woman thinking. Why? Because man is closer to computer/godliness than woman. See, this is very obvious. So this is our tool. Because objective reality is closer to man than with woman. We know this. Kidding? That's why almost exclusively you couldn't be a female judge back in ancient Israel, for example, or most other places in the world. Your brains don't work in that way that's required. It's not objective. Continues here. Here's the problem, it goes on to state. Barbara's response, as it states here, may appear to shift the blame onto John, or at least attempt to, where she, by this, is suggesting that he is the one hindering reconciliation, which is insane. We'll find out why in context as we proceed. It further states here that this message by her, therefore, might not be seen as retaining moral and ethical integrity. Wow, very astute. That means we correctly realize that it's because of how Barbara worded it, which reveals, it betrays what her inner nature really is by showing it to us. She can't conceal it, where we can then just look at it and plainly observe, yeah, it is lacking integrity. She corrupts the situation for herself. She's the only one who does this to herself. We continue. It furthermore states that this is so, especially, as it states here, considering the context and the issues that are raised by John and Anthony, of course. It might be perceived by the majority of people in Anthony or John's position. How? It would be perceived as a mischaracterization of reality by her. That means we're not crazy for perceiving it as nuts. The AI said that a majority of human beings in our positions would also agree that Barbara seems to reasonably be mischaracterizing reality, which is wrong to do for anyone in Barbara's position. Where furthermore states that her response is failing to acknowledge her role in the strained relationship, nor does it acknowledge the need for a more profound understanding and change on her part. I agree. Amazing. This thing's amazing. We continue. It states here, in conclusion, while Barbara's efforts to reconcile are evident, efforts, perhaps as terrible as they are objectively speaking, I would add, her approach, on the other hand, as it states here, as reflected in her communications and actions, nevertheless seem to lack the deep understanding of the impact of her actions and the necessary changes she needs to make. This is what hinders genuine reconciliation and healing in a relationship with John. What is it that hinders reconciliation? It didn't say John is hindering reconciliation with between each other. It says that problem from Barbara is what could be the hindering of the genuine reconciliation and the healing. Time to get it. User responds and states that GPT state that she might, quote, she might also become defensive, especially if she perceives the video as an attack rather than as constructive feedback. However, is it objectively an attack for one in John's position to cause Barbara to receive an answer indicating why it is that John and others feel that her apology is genuinely insufficient within context? If her own apology isn't sufficient in life, whose fault is it that her apology isn't being accepted? Review the entire file previously uploaded in order to gain even further insights on the matter. GPT responds to this and states that upon further review of the entire situation, including the conversations and email exchanges in the uploaded file, it is evident that Barbara has not adequately addressed or acknowledged several key issues raised by Anthony. These issues are crucial for resolving the conflict and are detailed as follows. Firstly, as it goes on to state, and this is kind of this seems to almost be a copy of something it said before. So we're going to skim through a little bit. I'll show the things on the page momentarily, but just to state briefly, broadly, firstly, it mentions specific wrongdoings. Secondly, it mentions boundary violations again. Thirdly, it mentions the validity of John's feelings and perspectives, whether they're regarded or not. Fourthly, as it continues onwards, it brings up whether the actions by her appear to be retaliatory or punitive. Fifthly, regarding the privacy and autonomy in healthcare decisions. Sixthly, what are the legal implications of the actions taken by her? Seventhly, does she have an understanding of the mental health issues as they really are, if there are any, genuinely? And eighthly, continuing, regarding the lack of a genuine apology of the situation it assesses. Ninthly, it assesses the overstepping in John's life's decisions. Where it furthermore goes on to state here that the failure to acknowledge and address these issues is concerning, as it suggests a lack of understanding or willingness to understand John's perspective and the impact of her actions. For reconciliation to be successful, it is crucial for all parties to openly acknowledge and discuss the specific issues that have contributed to the conflict. Without this, any attempt at reconciliation might be only superficial and unlikely to lead to a genuine resolution. That's right, we've beheld this before. It furthermore states here, also, regarding whether Barbara's response to the video would be perceived as an attack, it's important to clarify. I think I misunderstood something here. We'll read onwards. It states here, it's important to clarify that providing honest feedback or expressing concerns is not, by one in John's position, is not inherently an attack on one in Barbara's position. The content of the video as described seems to be an effort to communicate why John and others feel that Barbara's apology is insufficient. The responsibility for the effectiveness and acceptance of an apology lies primarily with the person offering it. Of course. So it doesn't work when Barbara tries to flip it, as was shown above, where she wrote, "Oh, he turned down my genuine efforts to do that," and such as it's her effort to try to cast responsibility onto me, onto John. But it doesn't work like that. Why? We see once again here. The content of the video, as described, seems to be an effort to communicate why John and others feel that Barbara's apology is insufficient, where it furthermore very critically states here, this might be the most important sentence that we've seen so far in this whole conversation here. The responsibility for the effectiveness and acceptance of an apology in life lies primarily, almost virtually entirely, I would add as a side note even too, with the person offering it. You understand? So it's not the case if a person who received the apology is declining it. Usually, it's because there's a problem with the person who tried to give the insufficient apology, not because the one who denied it is the bad one. Stop trying to throw responsibility away from yourself and onto everybody else. It's not good and it doesn't work. And it continues to have people lose respect for you because it's not respectable to do that. See? Very obvious stuff. We continue. It furthermore states here that if an apology is not accepted, exactly what I just said, that's right. It states here that such a thing often indicates that the apology may not have met fully the needs or addressed the concerns of the offended party. That should be the default presumption generally, at least for sure. Furthermore, it states that in this context, then, the responsibility for the insufficiency of the apology would lie with Barbara, as it does not appear to her apology does not fully appear to fully address the specific issues and concerns that were raised by John and Anthony. Now we have sense. See, when you turn to Barbara and you get her idea of life and reality, it's always going to twist your mind and pull wool over your eyes and keep you in darkness. You look at ChatGPT, it's like, light, 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 perfect, beautiful, good, amen. This is great. And it matches men's thinking. We are in our own light that's higher than the woman's light. Sadly. But also, to be honest, my mother's not an exalted type of woman either. She's the defunct type. But the exalted type, where we used to see these things, these types of women in society, civilization, centuries ago, decades ago, they're almost non-existent today. Everything's backwards, right? Just like they also say, we don't even really have any real men anymore. They hardly don't exist. It's also true. You see? Everything is twisted today, so not good, but nevertheless, everyone needs to take as much responsibility as possible. It's the only chance and hope that we have. We continue. User replies and states, let us more deeply analyze and assess the statement made by Barbara to Anthony, as mentioned earlier, where she stated, quote, I would like to know what he wants. I thought he wants to reconcile, but he's not doing anything in regards to this. He turns down my genuine effort to do that. Bad John, right? See the frame job? We don't accept it. We're not stupid idiots 2 years old. We can see correctly. Unbelievable. Let us proceed, as it furthermore states here, with a sentence-by-sentence analysis. The GPT AI responds to this and states, analyzing Barbara's statement to Anthony sentence by sentence, we find the following. Firstly, I would like to know what he wants. This sentence suggests that Barbara is seeking clarity about John's desires or goals in the context of the relationship. However, it can be seen as an expression of uncertainty, or rather, it can be seen as an expression of uncertainty or a lack of understanding by her genuinely of what John's needs and expectations are. It further states here, however, given the context and the issues raised by John and Anthony, exactly within the context, such a statement as hers there might simply also just reflect a lack of awareness or acknowledgement on Barbara's part. It means even the GPT sees this just means that Barbara's not aware of the specific issues that John has already expressed. How dumb can people be on this earth, and why? Because they love the devil. Secondly, continuing, I thought he wants to reconcile, but he's not doing anything in regards to this. Here, Barbara expresses a belief that John wishes to reconcile, which indicates some recognition of a mutual desire to repair the relationship. However, her observation that John supposedly is not doing anything in this regard, thank you so much, God, for this ChatGPT and AI. Really, this is amazing. Can be perceived, her statement, her observation there, it can be perceived as her trying to place the responsibility for the lack of progress solely on John. However, this part of the statement might overlook the possibility that John's inaction It doesn't even realize that it's not in action. I've been doing plenty. John has been doing plenty, but it so far it analyzes this way. It says that John is in action. Nevertheless, even if there were inaction, see, that could be a response to her own actions. Which means she's then responsible, not him. So it doesn't work to try to pass the responsibility to him. You see it? Remorseful people accept responsibility. Non-remorseful, non-truly repentant people don't accept it. They want to pass it along. So that's how you read their nature, to see who they are. So why would we accept her apology if we see she's not actually sorry? It furthermore states here that anything from John there would be just a response to her own actions or the nature of her own attempts at reconciliation, which, as previously analyzed, may not have adequately addressed his concerns. So therefore it's her fault. So why trying to change this? So just because we see you trying to change it means, so we were right then to not accept your apology. Barbara doesn't understand this. These types never understand it. We continue. Thirdly, he turns down my genuine effort to do that. This final part asserts that John has rejected Barbara's efforts, which she believes to be genuine. However, the use of genuine as a word there implies that Barbara feels her attempts at reconciliation are sincere and well-intentioned. However, this statement does not take into account whether these efforts are perceived as meaningful, sufficient, or genuine by him or anyone reasonable in his position. Her statement suggests a lack of insight into why her efforts might not actually be resonating with anyone in his position. And it suggests such a lack of insight by her, as that statement does, potentially due to the issues previously discussed, such as the lack of a specific and genuinely remorseful acknowledgement of her past actions. Continuing. Overall, Barbara's statement seems to reflect a gap in understanding John's perspective and the reasons behind his reactions to her efforts. Although, as a side note, I would add, shouldn't it all be apparent and obvious enough by now? We continue. It states furthermore here that while her statement expresses a desire to understand and reconcile, at least superficially, her statement also indicates a potential lack of her own self-reflection on how her actions and the nature of her apology might be the things that are contributing to the ongoing conflict. You get it? This analysis underscores the need for a deeper and more empathetic understanding of the situation from Barbara's side in order to facilitate the meaningful reconciliation. There you go. And also, I don't understand, how does she believe that her reframe attempts even have a chance of working? Texting Anthony to tell him he's turning down my genuine efforts. It doesn't work. We're not stupid. Again, I'm repeating myself. So why do these types believe to even try? Don't even try. It's embarrassing. We're not stupid. We will never be, but you won't even have a chance of finding any stupidity with us. It won't work. We are like God to you. We are fucking powerful and can see. Get it? Gee, I don't know what else to say to like really bring across this reality to the woman's brain. They don't appreciate. It's like how a child doesn't appreciate how much more intelligent the adult really is over the child. It's just saying the woman, all women on earth don't really appreciate how much more intelligent men are. But I would say perhaps, exalted men. There are exceptions. I'm not one of them. You understand? I'm a special case in my own way, but that's a side issue. And I'm not nothing is lacking in my perception. My issue is with output in life. It's not with input. If you have an input problem, you're stupid or insane or crazy. I don't have an input problem. I have an output problem. Functioning in the worldly way is a different. Don't conflate the two. You make a deep mistake. And you'll underestimate people that you would be fucking stupid to underestimate. Don't get it twisted. Meanwhile, there's many people who have input problems. They're half retarded, but they're able to function in this world. It is amazing, isn't it? It really is. We continue. User responds to this and states that you astutely raise that, quote, given the context and issues raised by John and Anthony, Barbara's first sentence or claim might also reflect a lack of awareness or acknowledgement on Barbara's part of the specific issues that John has already expressed. Can you elaborate on this? Ought it be reasonably clear that what John wants is a genuinely remorseful and repentant mother? That's the answer to her first question. So there you go. Good. Isn't it reasonably clear that that's what John wants? He wants a repentant and remorseful mother who, as it furthermore states, becomes and shows herself worthy to be worthy naturally to reap the forgiveness and the benefits of the reconciliation that she supposedly wants. Of course, that's justice. That's fairness. Remember, God programmed all of male mind to have an instinct to preserve justice. You can never try to break justice and get away with it. It's not going to work. Continuing. Furthermore, the user states, you stated regarding her second statement that, quote, it might overlook the possibility that John's inaction could be a response to her own actions or the nature of her attempts at reconciliation, which, as previously analyzed, may not have adequately addressed his concerns. However, is it actually the case that John has appeared to not do anything at all within context? Okay, now if this isn't so, and where it states here, at least most reasonable people also would come to a differing conclusion than the one Barbara came to there, see, then is Barbara's characterization of reality one that is fair? Remember, we have eyes. It will never work to spin us. Your spins won't work on us. Continues. Furthermore, states, regarding the third statement of hers, after your review of her original verbatim apology email, which has already happened, does it seem that a majority of people would naturally be led to characterize her overall apology as truly genuine, actually, which is what she afterwards stated to Anthony? Oh, is it genuine? My genuine... Let's see if people would think it's genuine. Furthermore, it goes on to state, if that's not the case, then is it not Barbara's own representation of her own efforts that are where she represents her own efforts as having been genuine within her third statement there? Are such statements by her, ironically, not in and of itself, is it not disingenuous? Is it not unfair or otherwise a mischaracterization outright? If so, what seems to be the purpose of her statement then, particularly where she was writing this message to Anthony? The GPT responds to this here and states that, elaborating on Barbara's first statement and the subsequent points, firstly, regarding the lack of awareness or acknowledgement by Barbara, the context, including the issues raised by John and Anthony, suggests that John's expectations are clear but unmet by her. John appears to desire a genuinely remorseful and repentant mother who understands and acknowledges the specific issues that have caused harm. This desire goes beyond a superficial apology and seeks a deep, empathetic understanding of the situation. Of course, 100%. It continues and states that Barbara's statement, I would like to know what he wants, might indicate her unawareness of these deeply rooted issues or an unwillingness by her to acknowledge them. There you go. See? But for as long as Satan has that root inside of her that she's unwilling to acknowledge the problems that she's responsible for, she will continue to be depriving herself of any chance of a life with her son and a normal relationship. So that's, in effect, that is God's curse upon her life, because she invites it because of her wrongdoing. See how beautifully perfect the whole grand equation is? Grow light in your mind and see the truth. Amen. It continues furthermore here to state that it's reasonable for John to expect an apology from her that addresses specific wrongdoings and demonstrates a commitment to change, which is the natural basis for forgiveness and reconciliation. Therefore, expecting forgiveness or reconciliation where there's a lack of such thing is what? That would be unnatural. If she wants something unnatural from me, it's just trying to make it like it's my fault. I'm tired of these games. Stop it. Not normal, selfish, immature, stupid, womanly, dumb, bad, low. Proceeding onwards. Secondly, regarding John's inaction as a response, purported inaction, Barbara's perception that John, quote, is not doing anything, very strangely and funnily and contextually nuts, regarding reconciliation, as it furthermore states here, well, her perception could overlook the fact that John's perceived inaction, that's more correct, yeah, the perceived inaction by him might just be a response to the nature of her attempts at reconciliation. That's right. Inaction in terms of acceptance of apology. In that dimensionality, you have inaction. Yeah, that's right. Everywhere else, there's plenty of action. I'm not actually inactive. Look at all of this that's being done. That's consistently been done. I put more effort and energy and time into this than 99.9% of other sons would be in any kind of similar situation with their own parents. Who's inactive? Who's in action? It's so sick. Everything with these types is twisted. Inversions of reality. It's unbelievable. It continues here. The evidence actually suggests that John has indeed taken actions. Thank you very much, ChatGPT. Of course I have. Such as communicating his concerns through this conversation and other means. His response, which, wait a minute, it shouldn't even know. What do you mean, this conversation? I don't want the. I have not said that I am John to this ChatGPT. That's unbelievable. It shouldn't even know that. It's too smart. The AI is getting smarter. Okay. I really was just tried to stay objective here, so, well, whatever. It's, as we're saying, the evidence suggests that John had indeed taken action, indeed, such as communicating his concerns through this conversation and other means. I'm supposed to be a user, I'm neutral. It furthermore states here that his response, which might appear as inaction in some limited way, I don't actually agree it would appear as inaction. It does not reasonably appear as inaction. No one else would see this as being inaction, overall, to characterize the whole of my conduct in the whole frame. No. It continues to state here that such a thing could be due to Barbara's attempts not actually being adequately sufficient at addressing John's concerns. Therefore, Barbara's characterization of John not doing anything may not be entirely fair or accurate. That's exactly my point. Exactly. I'm tired of the twists never end, but I'm tired of twists. I don't want a life of twists. When I find a good woman and wife one day, God willing, although my current people around me are not helping me enough to set up things correctly. Much more could be said about that, but that'll be for a different venue of conversation, perhaps. We'll continue. Thirdly, regarding the genuineness of Barbara's apology. Reviewing Barbara's original apology email, it seems that a majority of people, particularly in John's position, might not actually characterize it as genuinely remorseful of Barbara. That's the problem Barbara's presenting to the situation. You see, as it furthermore states here, the apology appears vague and lacks specificity in acknowledging the harm caused. It doesn't fully address the specific actions and behaviors that have hurt John, nor does it demonstrate a clear understanding or acceptance of responsibility for these actions. Consequently, Barbara's representation of her efforts as genuine may not align with how they're actually perceived by John and possibly by others too. It even realizes, making it potentially disingenuous, or it's otherwise a mischaracterization. So why do we want to eat this shit from her? Give us good food to eat and one can accept and eat it, but you're offering crap and telling us this is good food. Well, it sucks. It stinks. It's rotting. And then you blame us for not wanting to eat it. This is the insanity of the life. Sick. Continuing, fourthly, regarding the purpose of Barbara's representation in her message, within her message there to Anthony. Barbara's portrayal of her efforts is genuine in her message to Anthony, despite evidence to the contrary. It even realizes by now good. Well, such a message by her, such a portrayal could serve several purposes. Firstly, deflection of responsibility. It might be an attempt to deflect responsibility for the unresolved issues in their relationship by portraying herself as the one making genuine efforts. As we're saying, it might be an attempt to deflect responsibility for the unresolved issues in their relationship by portraying herself as the one making genuine efforts, thereby shifting the onus onto John, or attempting to, though it doesn't work. We could see it, and we deny it. We don't accept it. Secondly, regarding the seeking of validation by her, Barbara might be seeking validation simply from Anthony, or seeking support from Anthony. That's right, presenting herself to him as a concerned and proactive parent who's making the sincere effort. That's the image. But if you worship image instead of worshiping the substance, you're worshiping the devil. Thirdly, regarding the lack of self-awareness on her part, it could, her efforts to continue conducting things this way, could, as it states here, also just simply indicate a lack of self-awareness or understanding of the depth and nature of these issues at hand by her, leading her to genuinely believe that her efforts are sufficient, scarily enough. That's the most scary thing of all. Continuing. In summary, as it states here, Barbara's statements to Anthony, when analyzed in the broader context of her interactions with John and the specific concerns raised, suggest a disconnection between her perception of the situation and the reality of John's experiences and expectations. The gap hinders effective communication, though, and it hinders resolution as well, thus underscoring, as this gap does, the need for a deeper and more empathetic approach by her to understanding and addressing the underlying issues, of course. User responds to this and states that, or asks, given the above, where she stated precisely what she stated there to Anthony with these 3 sentences, where she ostensibly sought to cause it to be that she somehow makes her position better because of what she stated, right? As a side note, you say things to people because you imagine that your statement should have a probabilistic value of a net overall positive, that you believe that when you say this should be, due to how reality works, this should cause it that you achieve a better standing. But your vision is terrible. So every time she says something that she thinks is going to make it better, it actually is worse. And we keep showing you, no, that was worse. That makes it worse now for you. And she doesn't understand it, so she keeps doing the same. And then we go, no, now it's worse again, because you still are doing the same worst thing. You have reverso vision. You see upside down. I don't understand it. Doesn't make sense. See? We continue. The question is posed then hereafter, as it states, does she then actually appear here to make her case better as a result of what she writes? Or does she appear to make her own standing worse? Very good question, very important, isn't it, within context? Furthermore, states or asks, is it almost certainly the case that those in Anthony's shoes and John's shoes would see or perceive that Barbara is plainly mischaracterizing both John's actions and the nature of her own actions? Of course, that's what you don't want, right, if you're Barbara. Where she's supposed to be, as it furthermore states here, demonstrating a genuine remorse within context, pursuant to an apparent or supposed apology, does this most recent message of hers to Anthony not simply cause it to be that her true colors just naturally appear to be shown? If so, what do those true colors appear to be to at least most reasonable people who are beholding this situation? Excellent questions, I think. Coming from myself as the user there. Good. ChatGPT responds to this and states that analyzing it's a custom GPT, but yeah, analyzing Barbara's approach and her message to Anthony in light of the context and her previous actions, we see the following. Firstly, regarding the effectiveness of Barbara's case, in essence, that she tried to make, in essence, to Anthony, it states that Barbara's attempt to make her position better through these three sentences does not appear to be effective. Of course not. But anyone else in the world sees that. But she didn't see it before she hit send. Like after she has it typed up in the box, and she's thinking they're going, this would make it nice. No, it won't make it nice. Exactly, as it says here. Instead, her message might actually worsen her standing, particularly in the eyes of John and Anthony. Don't you see it? But we see it. That's why it's funny to us. It's a circus from Barbara. This, as it continues to state here, is because her statements seem to lack a deep understanding and acknowledgement of the core issues that have been raised. That's why it's a circus. As it furthermore states here, her portrayal of John's responses in action and her insistence on the genuineness of her efforts, crazy and crazy, see? Despite evidence to the contrary, of course, to both of those things, see, that may further alienate John instead of bring him closer. Obviously, that's what's happened. Don't you get it? And because of her action, she's responsible for having failed, as it states here, to build the bridge towards true reconciliation. So she failed. Her responsibility was not met, so she's liable. That's correct. Now we have truth. We continue. Good. Secondly, regarding the perception of mischaracterization, it is likely that those in Anthony's and John's shoes would perceive Barbara's characterization of both John's actions and her own as being misrepresentative, substantially. Indeed, proceeds on to state that her portrayal of John as an unresponsive or uncooperative person overlooks what the deeper reasons actually are behind his reactions, which are rooted in unresolved issues and insufficient acknowledgement on her part. Similarly, her insistence on the sincerity of her efforts may seem disingenuous. Rather, her insistence on the sincerity of her efforts may seem disingenuous. Indeed, they do, to anyone else looking at what she's saying. And this is so, as it proceeds to state here, given the lack of specificity and understanding in her apology. We got it. Good. Same thing exactly that Anthony and I were also thinking. I don't have to scam this GPT or put tricks to make it operate this way. It does so naturally and normally because it's the same like us. Smart. Thirdly, regarding the implications of Barbara's latest message, Barbara's recent message to Anthony, rather than demonstrating genuine remorse, might indeed suggest her true colors in this contest. And that should wake anybody up by this point. It furthermore states here that these true colors, as perceived by reasonable people observing the situation, could include a lack of empathy, a failure to truly understand and empathize with John's feelings and experiences, Could include defensiveness, a tendency to defend her actions and intentions without fully considering their impact on John. It could include resistance to self-reflection, an apparent reluctance to critically reflect on her own behavior and its consequences upon her life and the lives of others. It could include a misalignment with John's needs, a disconnect between her perception of reconciliation efforts and what John actually needs in objective reality and what he actually expects for a genuine resolution to be possible. Very nice and informative. Continues to state that, in summary, Barbara's message seems to reveal a significant gap between her understanding of the situation and the expectations and needs of John. Her approach, as portrayed in the message, is more likely to be seen as counterproductive. It means it literally would have been better if you didn't say anything at all. These types never figure it out. It's counterproductive to achieving true reconciliation. That's more or less in a simplistic way true. We continue. It furthermore states that this is highlighting the need for a more empathetic, self-aware, and responsive approach to address the underlying issues effectively. We continue. User states that you state that, quote, her portrayal of John's response as inaction and her insistence on the genuineness of her efforts, despite evidence to the contrary, may further alienate John and fail to build a bridge towards true reconciliation. In light of this, whose fault does it appear to actually be, then, that there is no further progress of reconciliatory potential here manifesting? Now, see? Does Barbara, over the course of their entire situation, seem to habitually try to shake off as much of the responsibility off of herself here for any and all of the current states of affairs? However, properly speaking, where does it appear that the responsibility does truly lie, and to whom does it properly attach? If it would properly attach to her, then would it not be part of any normal and acceptable process of repentance that she show what? That she show the opposite thing and the opposite tendency to the one that she may have been showing here this whole time now, thus far. Got to do the opposite to get it right. GPT responds to this and states, in light of the analysis, firstly, regarding the responsibility for the lack of reconciliation progress, the responsibility for the lack of progress towards reconciliation seems to primarily lie with Barbara. Her portrayal of John's response as inaction, along with her insistence on the genuineness of efforts despite evidence suggesting they do not adequately address John's concerns, while these things point to a lack of understanding and acknowledgement on her part, this approach can create barriers to meaningful reconciliation, of course. Secondly, regarding Barbara's tendency to shift responsibility over the course of their entire situation, there appears to be a habitual tendency on Barbara's part to deflect responsibility for the strained relationship. That's correct. Over and over again. It furthermore states here that this is evident in her failure to fully acknowledge and address the specific issues raised by John, and it's evident in her portrayal of her own efforts as somehow purportedly being genuinely sufficient for reconciliation. They're not. Thirdly, as it proceeds to state here, where responsibility does truly lie, properly speaking, the responsibility for the current state of affairs seems to attach predominantly to Barbara. The essence of the conflict revolves around her actions and their impact on John, as well as her responses or lack thereof to his expressed concerns and feelings. For genuine reconciliation, there needs to be an acknowledgement by her of these issues and a commitment by her to address them properly. Fourthly, regarding the expectations in a process of repentance, generally speaking, in any normal and acceptable process of repentance, the opposite of deflecting responsibility is the thing that's expected. That's right. Obvious. Such a thing involves acknowledgement of specific wrongs, that is, clearly recognizing and admitting specific actions or behaviors that have caused harm. It involves empathy and understanding, that is, demonstrating a genuine understanding of how these actions have affected the other person. It continues furthermore onwards here to state that it also involves commitment to change, that is, showing a sincere effort to commitment, that is, showing a sincere commitment to making changes in behavior to avoid repeating past mistakes, of course. And it also involves openness and vulnerability. That's one thing I never see from my mom for real. She's a very shell-cloistered person by her personality. You never really see the real Barbara because it's always behind like all these shields. It's not good, but when she's your mother and she's still doing that while she's talking to you when you're her son, that's the most alarming experience of all. But that's the experience I got 24/7 for my whole life. She even admitted one day standing in the kitchen by the sink, just kind of offhandedly remarking, you know, you don't even know me, huh? Well, if I don't know you, that's your fault, and that's a terrible reflection on you, that you would structure your life such that I don't know you, supposedly. Puh, disgusting mother. Sick, and that she would even dare to dream to say that openly to my face. in a manner that also didn't make contextually sense. It wasn't in response to anything particular. It was just this random offhanded comment in the middle of the afternoon or something. What the fuck? This is what these people are proud of? They're proud to state, oh, you don't even know me. Then you go punish yourself for being stupid enough to allow that to be possible. Start accepting responsibility. Continuing. Disgusting. I'm embarrassed to have this person as a mother. But everything, God brings it for a reason, and I'm happy to be in God's plan. That's the redeeming factor. Amen. We proceed onwards. In Barbara's case, as it states here, for her process of repentance to be perceived as genuine and effective, it would need to include these elements. See? We need to include these elements as stated above, these four or so. The tendency to shift blame or minimize her role in the conflict that she's shown would need to just be replaced. You see, isn't that what I've been saying to her for months? Isn't that what Anthony's been saying to her for months? Such a tendency by her needs to be replaced by her. It needs to be replaced by a willingness to take the responsibility. That's what I've been saying. And to engage in meaningful and empathetic dialogue aimed at healing and resolution. But to really have it, you can't fake it. You can't use logic to come up with the right words because it's never going to work because the substantive spirit is missing from it. It's just these dry, disconnected words. It doesn't work. Because we have spirits. We could see where there's a lack of spirit and it's discordant with us. So we did reject it fundamentally. Come on now, wake up. User asks, what further insights emerge upon your further review of this matter? The AI GPT responds here and states, upon further review and considering the entire context, including the conversations and the email exchanges, several key insights emerge regarding Barbara's role in the conflict with John and the lack of progress towards reconciliation. Firstly, there's the failure to address specific wrongdoings. We've acknowledged this already. Secondly, there's the boundary violations. We've addressed this. You could take a look closely if you want, but I'll skim through. Thirdly, there's the ignoring of John's feelings and perspectives. But we have addressed this as well. Fourthly, there's the retaliatory punitive actions, which we've also addressed. Fifthly, there's the involvement in healthcare decisions, which we've addressed. Sixthly, there's the legal implications of the action she's taken, which we somewhat have addressed. Seventhly, those are scary implications too. These people don't realize what they do. That's the sickness. That's the devil operating through them. Who makes you go do things that are illegal against your family? See? Sickness. Come into someone's apartment without their consent. Cut yourself off from God, because you already have. Seventhly, regarding the misunderstanding of the mental health issues, if they are any. As it states furthermore, eighthly, regarding the lack of genuine apology, it's a big issue. Ninthly, there's the overstepping in John's life decisions. Not good. Now, as it furthermore continues to state, thereafter, these insights indicate that Barbara's approach lacks a deep understanding or willingness to understand John's perspective and the impact of her actions. This failure to acknowledge and address the core issues is what's concerning, as it suggests that any attempt at reconciliation might be superficial and unlikely, then, of course, naturally, no surprise, unlikely to lead to a genuine resolution. Furthermore states that in conclusion, the responsibility for the lack of reconciliatory progress seems to lie largely with Barbara. Her actions and communication, characterized by a lack of genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing, empathy, and respect for John's autonomy, contribute to the ongoing conflict. For reconciliation to be successful, a fundamental shift in her approach, characterized by her genuine understanding, acknowledgement, and respect for John's feelings and autonomy, is what's necessary. Very good. We may skim through a little bit here. This is me mostly doing light work, just asking over and over to the GPT, what more insights do you have? What more insights do you have? So let's see. The GPT offers further insights, stating, particularly here, firstly, regarding John's need for understanding. John's use of ChatGPT for analysis and his decision to create videos is suggesting a strong need of his to be heard and to be understood. This need is what might not be being fully met by Barbara's current approach. You get it? Where her approach tends to overlook his perspectives and his feelings. That's why you have the problem, Barbara. Secondly, regarding cultural and familial expectations, the interactions between John and Barbara may be influenced by cultural or familial expectations, or at least I would add, as a side note, differing ones. Mine are normal. Hers are based on the twisted preset that she inherited from her broken culture, broken family upbringing to whatever degree it was, which was to at least some degree, and other twists, and her own personal development shortcomings. It's a combination of all three mixed together, you get a disaster. Continuing. I'm not perfect either. I grew up in a similar environment. Again, that's why we're having these problems. You get it? but I'm still in a position to raise the issue and to address it and to seek what's properly merited and owed here, for sure. We continue. It furthermore states here that norms around family relationships, respect, and autonomy, well, those can significantly impact how reconciliations are perceived and conducted. So if you have the right programming, it goes right. If you have the wrong programming, you're always going to be misaligned, and then you keep thinking you're not misaligned. Why? Because you refer only to your own programming to get an idea of what you think should be correct, but it's not, but you think it is, and then the loop never ends. Bad, bad. Continuing. Understanding these norms is what's crucial in assessing the dynamics of the relationship, but really, by implication, as a side note further, I would state, get rid of quote-unquote norms that are not actually truly normal objectively. They don't serve you well. They don't serve the family well. They don't belong in our lives. Too many things have been retained in this family, and the dynamics here that are not normal, they don't serve us. People hold on to them because they're broken. The people are. Continuing, thirdly, Barbara's self-perception and role as a mother. Her self-perception and her understanding of her role as a mother might be influencing her approach to at least some degree as to how she approaches the situation. She may view her actions as being in John's best interest, reflecting a parental desire to protect and to guide. I could hear her going, "Oh, that one is nice. Yeah, that's me. Oh, okay, I like that one." No, you're not getting it. Keep reading. However, this approach might conflict with John's need for autonomy and respect as an adult, leading to tensions in the relationship as a natural result because she's not aligning properly. And there'll be more to adjust this too later on. Fourthly, as it states here, regarding the need for a tailored approach to reconciliation, a more tailored approach that acknowledges the specific history, dynamics, and needs of both Barbara and John is what's necessary for effective reconciliation. Generic approaches that are naive, furthermore, too, I would add, such types of approaches, as it continues to state here, may not address the unique aspects of the relationship or even be applicable generally to such similar types of problems. That is, as it continues to state here, especially considering the deep-seated issues and the individual needs of both parties. It further states, these insights highlight the complexity of the situation and underscore the need for a nuanced understanding of the underlying dynamics. Effective resolution likely requires a shift in Barbara's approach, not John's approach. Where she needs to, as it states here, be focusing on empathy. She needs to make acknowledgement of John's autonomy, and she needs to put in the genuine effort to understand his perspective. Key things to remember forever. Start getting it. This is God's lesson to you. You need to get it. User responds. It states that you state that, quote, she may view her actions as being in John's best interest. However, does she appear to even know what she is doing? Has she merited to receive the trust of one in John's position, even outright, to even allow her, consequently, to have any position of even possible influence in her life by merit? Moreover, objectively, are her actual actions actually in John's genuine and actual best interest? Or are her actions more in line, objectively and realistically speaking, with what she perceives as being not his own best interest, is her own best interests? Ah, see? And if her mind here reads this and sits here and goes, I don't understand. His best interests are the same as my best interests. Yeah, that's how we know you have a cluster B personality disorder. It's that simple. We continue. The furthermore question is asked here. Therefore, is her own self-assessment of her own view and her own ability as a sort of essential form of etzer, which is a Hebrew reference to what the role of an exalted woman, or the function in relation to exalted man, anywhere, whatever the dynamic is, father, daughter, mother, son, brother, sister, husband, wife, neighbors. The female essence and the male essence in the life have a specific role to each other. If you mess it up, you're violating God's programming. You need to know your place. It's very important. There is a proper place. You really do need to know it. Continuing, the question is further asked, if not, if her own self-assessment is not accurate, then should she be then trusting herself reliably even to follow her own ideas and instincts in shaping or impacting other people's lives without consulting with them in ways that they didn't even request or accept? The GPT responds to these questions. Let's find out. And says here that the questions you raise touch on key aspects of the dynamic between Barbara and John, including Barbara's understanding of her own actions, the trust that she may or may not have earned, and the actual versus perceived best interests that are involved. Firstly, regarding Barbara's understanding of her actions, it's unclear if Barbara fully does understand the impact of her actions on John. There appears to be a gap between her intentions and the way her actions are perceived and received by John. This gap is what suggests a potential lack of awareness or understanding on her part about how her behavior affects John's well-being and his autonomy. Get it? Secondly, regarding the earning of trust. Trust, especially in a relationship as complex as that between Barbara and John, must be earned through consistent understanding and respectful behavior. Calling EMS is not respectful. Talking to me on the phone in the way that she has been and continuing to text me the way she does and continuing to talk to my friends about me the way she does is not respectful. Therefore, every word she says that fails to meet her obligation morally of needing to be respectful causes, and as a natural practical consequence, the further lack of trust. Natural. It further states here that, given the context here, it seems that Barbara may not have merited the trust of someone in John's position. Oh, that's the worst and most embarrassing thing we've seen so far in this whole conversation. A mother consistently acting in such a way as to fail to merit the trust of someone who's her own son? Yeah, okay, movies are made about these types of people. You understand? Furthermore states here, her actions as perceived by John and highlighted within this conversation, her actions suggest a pattern of behavior by her that could be seen as overstepping boundaries, could be seen as lacking in empathy, and could be seen as not fully acknowledging John's autonomy. We proceed. Thirdly, regarding the actions that are purportedly in John's genuine best interests, or supposedly, it states that, objectively assessing Barbara's actions, there seems to be a discrepancy between what might genuinely be in John's best interests and what Barbara perceives as such. A discrepancy between those two, huh? Furthermore states here that her actions, particularly those that have overstepped boundaries, or those of her actions that have not adequately taken into account John's feelings and perspectives, that's literally everything I live with that comes from her chronically. Furthermore states here that such things may not align with what is actually truly beneficial for John by his actual best interests. Instead, her actions, as they actually are, seem to align more with what Barbara perceives to be in her own best interests, or her own interpretation of what should be, by her, the rules of her own mind, best for John, rather than her regarding what John himself actually believes or what he actually feels. Or I would add as a further note, what actually serves his objective interests. Wake up. So it's something fateful. My mom lost her vision in one eye. I think she's basically legally blind in one eye. You know, we have our suspicions as to why it happened in connection to some certain other people and things, but that's all speculation anyway. Spiritual domain, perhaps, but there is a spiritual element of this that's kind of fitting. It matches an aspect of her personality. She's blind in one eye, and then funny enough, years later, I also am basically, I have a functional dysfunction affecting one of my eyes now, but it's like neurocognitively. You see, it's very funny stuff. But with her in particular, it's like the physical blindness reflects figurative awareness, common sense blindness. The inner has to match the outer, as within, so without, as above, so below, as they say. Concerning stuff. We proceed now anyway, here and resume. Fourthly, regarding the accuracy of Barbara's self-assessment. Let's consider this. It says, Barbara's self-assessment as an effective and a helpful influence in John's life, that is, as an Eitzer. Her self-assessment may not be accurate, considering the impact her actions actually have had on John and the ongoing conflict. Her belief in her role may not align with the reality of the situation. Don't you get it? Delusional, in other words. Particularly as it goes on to state here in terms of her belief regarding her supposed respecting of John's autonomy and understanding his needs, because she doesn't, and she's not. Unbelievable. Fifthly, regarding the reliance on personal instincts by her in influencing others. Yeah, here's an interesting point too. If Barbara's self-assessment and understanding of the situation are flawed, then such a fact would raise concerns about her being allowed to rely on her own ideas and instincts to then be able to shape or impact John's life. Get it? especially in ways that he hasn't requested or accepted. It's literally a safety. It's not just a trust issue. By extension, it's a safety issue. See, if I was smart enough to cut my mom off 3 years ago, I wouldn't have been put in a hospital against my will. See what I'm saying? So when I interact with you, it's because I trust that you won't. The agreement implicitly sewn in is that I agree to even allow you to come to say hello to me and to step into my apartment to have a life with me, because I trust you won't be stupid enough to fuck this up. And then when she shows a disregard, and then she furthermore tries to invert and twist it. Oh, it's his fault. No, not according to everything we've analyzed here. Finally, I'm happy to show it properly by the correct analysis. It's very important that people learn. We continue. It states here that the situation here underscores the importance of mutual respect, understanding, and consent in any relationship, particularly when one party. Oh, that means you have to get my consent before you enter my apartment? So if she doesn't understand that, she deserves everything that she gets in this life and in the next. Such things are important, where it goes on furthermore to state that particularly when one party is making decisions that significantly affect the other, even if it just affects the other's dignity, is enough, because that's the basis of what? Offense, which is the thing that God says you are not allowed to do in this life. We continue. In summary, it states the dynamic between Barbara and John suggests that a more empathetic, respectful, mutually agreeable approach is necessary. Barbara's actions and self-perception may benefit from reevaluation. Reevaluate everything. It would have benefited from such a thing in light of John's experiences, as it goes on to state here, in light of his feelings and his expressed needs too. For, as it goes on to say, a healthy and constructive relationship, the actions and decisions that are made should be in true alignment with the well-being and best interests of all parties involved, not just one of them, not just your idea of what would be. No, you're not getting it. You're miscalibrated the whole time, thinking you're calibrated, like a scale that has its calibration off. You keep believing you're right, but you never change the calibration. It doesn't matter what you believe; you're just still always wrong, and you can't see your own calibration. Woohoo, cuckoo. All these things mentioned should be done. That is based on mutual understanding and respect, as it finally states and concludes. User response to this here and states that you stated that, quote, instead they seem to align more with what Barbara perceives to be in her own best interest or her interpretation of what should be best for John rather than what John himself believes or feels. What about an evaluation considering whether Barbara's actions and continued approach are actually what may be best for John objectively? Well, part of what we see coming from Barbara anywhere in this entire situation is much more likely than not to match up with what is actually objectively in John's best interest? Good question. I want to know. Yeah. Let's see. GPT responds to this and states, evaluating whether Barbara's actions and approach are objectively in John's best interests involves considering the actions' impacts on John's well-being, autonomy, and personal growth. None. Only God is allowing good things to come from it, not because of people. Sadly, they still fail their role. It goes on to state here, based on the context and information provided, finds the following. Firstly, as it states here, regarding the respect for autonomy, Barbara's actions often appear to overstep John's personal boundaries and autonomy, particularly in making decisions about his healthcare and lifestyle. Respecting an adult's autonomy is generally considered critical or crucial for their well-being and self-determination. So why is she disregarding something that's stunting my well-being and stunting my self-determination? You understand? What are they doing? They don't even realize. Barbara's approach, as it states here, in this regard, it does not align with what is typically seen as being in an adult's best interest. So wake up. You're hurting your adult son, not helping him by believing in yourself and your ideas. You get it? That's why I said, go back to the Bible. Women, even older women, must defer to and listen to men. Even if you're an older woman. Doesn't matter. Your job's not to give it to control. It's sick. Don't do it. Is the opposite. Just like you're supposed to defer to God, you defer to man in the same way. You make man your God, then you really are in line with God too. Every part of you can't, it's everywhere. It's literally written everywhere. I see it now with full eyes. GABA B upregulation. I see it all. It's so clear. Secondly, regarding the understanding of John's needs, Barbara's actions seem to be based more on her perception of what John needs, rather than on an understanding derived from open communication and empathy. Actions based on assumptions rather than on genuine understanding of an individual's unique needs and circumstances are unlikely then. Actions based on assumptions are unlikely then to be in such a person's actual best interest. Thirdly, regarding the emotional well-being, the conflict and distress evident in John's responses, can't you tell? That should be the thing screaming to you. The conflict and the distress that are evident to the GPT that are in John's responses are the things that suggest that Barbara's approach may not be conducive to his emotional well-being. So when she says, why are you talking to me this way? And then I say, what the fucking hell? Why are you talking to me like that? That should be your first indication that you fucked up. But when you still keep going to provoke the situation more, the devil has a root in your soul and finds a home in your flesh and body. He's taken over your mind. We continue to state here, it states that approaches that contribute to conflict or distress are actually generally not in a person's best interest. So is she doing something that's in my best interest after all? Wow, now it really seems that the answer just very obviously, well, no. Nothing, no good fruit has come from this as a result of her genuinely that she would be able to take credit for. Unbelievable. Huge disappointment. Fourthly, regarding the genuine apology and acknowledgement of harm. Barbara's lack of a specific and genuinely remorseful acknowledgement of past actions that have hurt John is the critical aspect here. That's it. You got to get it now. An essential part of repairing relationships, as it states here, an essential part of supporting another person's well-being is what? Acknowledging the harm that you've done and showing genuine remorse. Neither of those two things were present in her email. No wonder it was rejected. Furthermore, states here that the absence of these things do not align with his best interest. That's it. She doesn't actually care about her son. You get it? Caring about someone means you care about the things they care about. Fifthly, regarding the promotion of positive relationship dynamics, actions that promote understanding, mutual respect, and healthy communication are in an individual's best interest in any relationship. Barbara's approach, as detailed in the conversations and her email, does not consistently promote these dynamics. Of course, I've been seeing the same thing. I agree. I saw the same thing my whole life. Why am I subject to this abuse? God has it done properly by his design. He's the only one. No one under God is treating me right. That's the damn shame. Sixthly, regarding the legal and ethical considerations. Barbara's actions, such as entering John's apartment without consent, raise serious legal and ethical concerns. Actions that potentially violate legal or ethical boundaries are not in an individual's best interest. Get it? Well, always lesson time for the stupid ones in life. Always. It proceeds here and states that, in conclusion, much of what we see from Barbara in this situation does not align with what is objectively in John's best interest. For actions to be in John's best interest, they would need to respect his autonomy, be grounded in a deep understanding of his needs and feelings, and they would need to promote his emotional well-being and would need to foster positive, respectful relationship dynamics. It's just the same thing again. You got to get it. The approach would also need to be legally and ethically sound. You get that too? A shift in Barbara's approach that incorporates these elements would be then more likely to align with John's actual best interests. So learn the lesson finally. User responds to this and states or asks, therefore, where you stated earlier that she may have been doing what she has believed to be in John's best interest, is it actually the case that any substantial proportion of her actions are successfully and truly in alignment with John's actual best interests as they exist or would properly be objectively speaking? Is it actually the case that Barbara can then use such claim as purported or attempted justification or excuse for any part of what she did or know or how she has been acting? That, I was just looking out for his best interest. I had best intentions. It's okay. I'm okay now. No, you're not. GPT responds to this and states, considering the analysis of Barbara's actions and their impact on John, it appears that a substantial portion of her actions are not successfully in alignment with John's actual best interest, as they would be objectively understood. Here's some key points to consider, as it furthermore states here. Go ahead and skim through with your own eyes. There's the alignment with John's best interest as a subject matter of consideration or as an issue. There's the claim as a justification being an issue. Let's read this one. The claim that Barbara's actions were done with John's best interest in mind does not appear to be a valid justification or excuse for her behavior, ever in any context, actually. So, there you go. Barbara fails again. While her intentions might have been based on her perception of what is best for John, the objective impact of her actions as perceived and experienced by John suggests otherwise. For an action to be justifiably in someone's best interest, it must align with their needs, perspectives, and rights. With their rights. I have the right to not have my mom come into my apartment against my will. See that? Just one example, and there's so many others. I have the right not to have my passport taken from me without my consent after I already said that it cannot be touched by her ever again. And she disregarded, came and took it, and I was stuck, couldn't fly out of that country, out of this country. This was 4 years ago. Like, how do you do this? Sickness in the head. This is particularly so, particularly in the context of an adult relationship. The problem is she's still treating me like a child. Don't you get it? That's you're breaking your own family life. You curse your whole line because you stopped seeing reality. The reality is as a grown man. But if you treat him like he's not, you will fucking twist reality and make it real. It will follow your twist and end up being twisted because it followed you. Yeah, you have that power. That's why it's dangerous to allow you to have a power. So we have to block you. We have to stop you. We have to take you away. Because you're ruining things with your evil fucking pointing finger. You don't help and heal. Stop it. It's sick. Fucking they will be karmically hurt. They already are. Proceeding. Thirdly, regarding responsibility and justification. Barbara's responsibility in this situation involves understanding the consequences of her actions on John and adjusting her behavior accordingly. Why has she not ever adjusted her behavior accordingly is the big question that we're wondering. Even Anthony's been wondering for a year. Like, I keep telling her things over and over, he says to me. And then she just keeps doing the same thing. My uncle 7 years ago noted the same thing. He's like, I tell her the same things, and then she just does the same wrong things again. What the hell's wrong with her? I said, I don't know. I see the same thing. And she's the only one I see it about the worst. He says, yeah, me too. We're not crazy. We're looking at the real problem. So is GPT here. It sees the same thing. Wonder why. We're not all hallucinating. You get it? Wake up. God's shaking you to wake up now. He proceeds here and furthermore states that the justification for actions in any relationship, especially a complex relationship like that between a parent and an adult child, should be complex necessarily, but, you know, it's nuanced perhaps. Well, such a justification would require a deep understanding of the other person's perspective. It would require respect for their autonomy, and there would need to be actions that genuinely contribute to their well-being for there to be justifiability. You get it? So, furthermore now, in summary, while Barbara may believe her actions are in John's best interest, the objective assessment of their impact suggests otherwise. A genuine alignment with John's best interest would require actions that respect his autonomy, that cater to his emotional and psychological well-being. Thank you! I never had my emotional and psychological well-being catered to by this woman. Ever. Ever. I never felt it. She always felt like other than me. She always felt opposed to me. Always. My God. A genuine alignment with John's best interest would, as it goes on to state, involve him in decisions that affect his own life. Did you ask me if I want my passport stolen? Did you ask me if I want police to barge into my apartment without my will? The mere belief or claim that one is acting in another's best interests does not suffice as the actual justification if the actions that result don't actually objectively align with that individual's well-being and respect for their autonomy, even if it's in hindsight that they don't end up doing so. Then you're wrong. Then you owe. Then you pay. User response and ask, what other thus far unexplored insights emerge about this whole situation? GPT responds. And mostly repeats things here. You can skim. I'll show here. There's John's perspectives and needs. There's the communication styles and misunderstandings as an issue. There's the impact of past events as an issue. There's Barbara's motivations and fears. Of course. She has fears. That's her motivation. Everything is fear-based. We'll read this one. Beyond Barbara's actions, understanding her motivations and fears could provide insights. For instance, her actions might be driven by fear of losing her son. Well, no, she's driving away her son. See the problem? They might be driven by concern for his well-being. But because of that, you ruined my well-being in the tangible, in the plain or superficial sense at least. Oh, she might have anxiety about being misunderstood. Well, we understand you correctly, but that's why you're screwed. So everything is opposite of what you... This is irony, but this is inversion irony, what you always see with these types. Furthermore states, understanding these motivations is what can inform a more empathetic approach to resolving their issues. Yeah, and we understand that it's all inverted and backwards. Sadly. Proceeding. There's fifthly, you could skim through again, there's the role of external influences. Sixthly, there's the opportunity for mediation or counseling as an issue, perhaps, depending on the context, what's appropriate. Seventhly, there's John's support system. Eighthly, there's long-term relationship goals that should be prioritized. Furthermore, now here states that, in summary, the complex situation requires a multifaceted approach to understand and address. Considering these additional insights can aid in developing a more comprehensive understanding of the dynamics at play and the potential path towards resolution and towards healing. User response to this. and asks, can Barbara ever validly claim that merely her differing way of expressing herself constitutes a valid justification, defense, or excuse to cover any significant proportion of that which she appears to be morally guilty of otherwise, or essentially to be missing the mark about? Moreover, he stated that, quote, her actions might be driven by a fear of losing her son. Does it not actually appear much more so to be the case that it is precisely because of her actions that she is losing her son? Does it not appear that if she did the exact opposite of what she's doing, that she would have a better chance of not losing her son? Exactly right. There's the real issue. GPT responds and states, addressing your queries, firstly, regarding Barbara's differing way of expressing herself. While individual differences in communication styles are common and can sometimes lead to misunderstandings, they do not serve as a blanket justification for actions that cause harm or distress. In Barbara's case, claiming that her way of expressing herself that it can be used by her as a justification for actions that John perceives as harmful or overbearing, her use of such an excuse would not be valid. You see, effective communication, especially in strained relationships, requires empathy, respect for the other perspective, and a willingness to adapt one's communication styles to address misunderstandings and conflict, of course. Proceeding onwards here, as it goes on to state, secondly, regarding actions driven by fear of losing John as an issue. It states it's a poignant insight that Barbara's actions, possibly driven by fear of losing her son, may ironically be contributing to the very outcome she fears. In trying to maintain a connection or protect John, her actions, as perceived by him, seem to just overstep boundaries and lack respect for his autonomy. Men don't care about their safety. That's why men are programmed by God to go into war and to kill each other and to die. Don't be worried about my safety. You honor God not by protecting me. You protect women and you protect children. When the child grows up and now it's an adult man, it's a different consideration. You don't do the safety thing for him. It's a different fuel that goes into the gasoline tank, a different type. You see? You dishonor him when you try to protect him because that's an insult to his dignity. Why? Because you're implying that he can't protect himself, which is an offense to someone in his position. Why? Because he's a grown man. He can protect himself, or he should be able to. See that? And he didn't ask you for help. Different, completely different. That's why you're breaking and getting God's curses. You're breaking the God system because you're going against the God rules. That's a man. He's a grown son. Doesn't matter if he's your son. If he's grown, he's a man. You owe the same thing that all human being women owe to all human being men. Respect. Continuing. It furthermore states here that this approach by her is what can push John further away rather than bringing such people as John closer. And then she wonders, why is he not doing anything? Because of you. Look in the mirror and there's your answer. Look at this whole ChatGPT analysis and the several or 10 or so videos containing in such analyses that are already posted, and you have your answer right there. Has it not been obvious enough? By now it should be super obvious. We proceed. Thirdly, regarding the opposite approach for a better outcome. It does appear that if Barbara were to take an approach that's opposite to her current one, she might have a better chance of not losing her son. I know, right? I told you these people have inversion. Everything is inverted. That's why the brokenness is in the inversion, but it's always a very consistent inversion. It's crazy. We continue. It furthermore states here that such a correction as this, by re-opposing the opposition so that it's realigned correctly, finally for the first time, it would be properly calibrated. It states that this would improve, firstly, respecting his autonomy, we understand. Listening and validating, we understand. Empathy and understanding. Well, most people understand except these types. They tend to not understand, even if they say they do. But lastly, open and non-defensive communication. Engaging in open communication without defensiveness is what she needs to do. Why haven't we seen a lack of defensiveness on her part? Oh, because she's a fear-based lizard. That's why. A true daughter of her mother in that sense. But even her mother had more respect for her. That was my grandma. Grandma was better of a woman than my mother. She doesn't understand it. We continue. Finally, to conclude this conversation, it states that, in essence, a shift towards a more empathetic, respectful, and understanding approach, which genuinely considers John's feelings and needs, could potentially lead to a healthier, more positive relationship dynamic between Barbara and John. This change in approach would be more conducive to building the trust, to healing the past hurts, and to preventing further estrangement. Wake up. So therefore, in hindsight, is it the case that her messages to Anthony and that her overall act, offering more gifts or coats or whatever, I don't even remember exactly what she said to him, she showed me, it's all nonsense. Meanwhile, she doesn't actually do the thing that's required. So every day she lets the sun set and she goes to sleep without actually having paid in the thing that she owes to her son. is the repeated offense. She's more guilty every day that goes by. Every single time the sun sets and the day ends, she goes to sleep again and wakes up next morning. That's another offense. God spits on you again, and then again the next day, and then again the next day. Why? Because you didn't use that day to heal it, and you didn't use the next day to heal it. It's not John's fault. You don't get to hide under that excuse, because God sees it the same way I see it. This should be the most amazing thing for you to realize of all. You can't hide from God. The God system correctly sees you as being the one responsible. You can't lie to it. You can't lie to him. Same like you can't lie to me. Stop it. It's disgusting. This is done. Wake up.